The annual demonstrations to mark the Battle of the Boyne have been cancelled this year because of the coronavirus pandemic. So, hello and welcome to the 12th Revisited. Now, we know that people have different views about Orangeism and the 12th of July, but over the next hour we will be looking at things from the perspective of those who take part in these parades each year. We've got loads of great BBC archive footage for you to enjoy, and I'll be joined by some of the historians and commentators who have helped us to explain the 12th, its traditions and spectacle down through the years. I'm here in Loch Gall, the birthplace of the Orange Order, and this monument behind me was erected to mark the 200th anniversary of the Battle of the Diamond in 1795. And we'll hear more about how this significant event played its part in the foundation of the institution a bit later on. And so welcome, David Hume. And I suppose it's fair to say that of all the traditions to do with the 12th of July, then the demonstrations are the most notable?
Well, parades are certainly something that are very, very historic, and in terms of the Orange tradition, obviously a very important part of it. The first account of an actual Orange Order parade is July 1796 from Lord Gosford at Market Hill, and it talks about the parades, and there's not really much of a difference when you look at Lord Gosford's account in terms of the structure of the parade and so on. He talked about companies of men with flags at the head with numbers on the flags, and drum and fifers and so on. So you can see the beginnings of what evolved then into the types of parades we see now.
The military tradition of parading with bands and flags is a very ancient one indeed. But in more recent times, the 12th probably takes its lead from other similar events, such as the trooping of the colour. Well, this began in 1748 as the official marking of the monarch's birthday, but it has its origins dating back to the beginning of the 18th century, and perhaps even to the Williamite period itself. Indeed, this 12th, as you can see today, stylistically echoes this tradition of trooping, or literally parading your colours and flags so that they can be easily recognised and indeed honoured.
And the colour escorts too would presumably have a military precedent.
Well, they do, Walter. Yes, you'll notice at the head of lodges and bands we see groups carrying flags and bannerets. These effectively replicate the historical military practice of forming an elite guard of veterans, or colour guards and colour escorts, whose job it was to protect the flag at all costs when on the battlefield. The flag or standard represents the honour and pride of the unit, and consequently it would become a much sought-after prize for an enemy on the battlefield. Practically, it was also a rallying point for troops during the confusion of battle, and the loss of a unit's flag was a source of great humiliation.
The original banners would have been much larger than the ones we see on parade today, so it would have required a fair bit of muscle to carry them, particularly if there's a wind. In terms of art, they're a fantastic expression of art, and they're a sort of storybook of all the historical events that really matter to the Orange Lodges.
We just saw there the banner of Dr. Kane, former County Grand Master of Belfast. He was interesting because he was a fluent Irish speaker.
Very interesting figure, yes, he was indeed. And he helped to revive the Irish language in Belfast during his lifetime. So not what you might expect to find. It's not a stereotypical Orange person.
Donegal Castle there on the banner of one of the lodges.
Yes, that's Loyal Sons of County Donegal, and they was formed by men originally from Donegal who came to Belfast to find work.
They're a really fantastic way to give people a synopsis of that history, I think, because you don't have to read a very weighty book. You just go and watch these banners go past and you get something of a flavour of what the organisation stands for.
How have parades changed?
The railways opened up facilities for lodges to travel to larger towns and districts to hold demonstrations in a much wider area. So that's one big change factor. They would have been much more localised and much smaller in the past. And another would be bands would have started out probably without uniforms. Then they might have evolved into having caps with a star on them or something along those lines. Nowadays there's a fantastic array of uniforms, very expensive uniforms for bands to upkeep.
I'd like to introduce you to David Montgomery. Now, David, I know you as a drumming instructor. You're with the Omagh Protestant Boys. You teach drumming there, and of course you're at SE Musical, and you keep the bands kitted out with all sorts of things, not least the uniforms.
Yes. What a lot of people don't understand is all bands have their own bespoke uniform and style. And this is all self-funded by the band and the band's members.
And I'm just looking at you now because it's very much the style of the Marines and the very striking helmet. And it's the cost of all these, isn't it? It's huge.
Yes, I mean, the helmet that I'm wearing, we've just purchased 50 helmets. They're exactly the same as worn by the Royal Marines, and they cost the band £6,500.
And how do you raise that money?
Fundraisers of various sorts, sponsored bike rides, dinners, hoedowns, all anything and everything.
When we're out and making the programme, I'm always surprised by how many Scottish accents I hear, and then you see Scottish bands going past.
Very strong connections with Scotland, and they really start in 1798 when there are militia regiments sent over because there's a lot of tension in Ireland at the time. The 1798 rebellion comes along, of course. So some of those Scottish members of those regiments become aware of Orangeism, and they're initiated into Orange lodges, particularly in County Antrim and around Lisburn, where the camps would have been for the militia. And then in 1798 they go back, after the rebellion, they go back with warrants from the Grand Lodge of Ireland, and 1821 is the first recorded Orange Parade in Scotland. And also then you have a vast influx of Protestant immigration particularly from the Ulster counties into Scotland, and people like mining communities, mill communities, shipyard communities, and so they take Orange traditions with them or become involved then with the Orange tradition in Scotland. So there are a lot of family connections, maybe 2-3 generations down the line. When you see modern Scottish bands or lodges on parade, there's a fair chance a large proportion of those people are going to have family connections here.
The Battle of the Boyne, I wonder why it is celebrated, because it wasn't the decisive battle in the story, was it?
It's celebrated largely because it was the one and only battle that the two kings were present at. So I think that gives it the sort of iconography around it. They were both there, that William, as we know, was victorious. James fled the battlefield and goes back to France and leaves the war to his generals. It's not a very good military move, I don't think.
And it was from that battle, I'm presuming, that when it comes to artefacts, they'll be the ones that are most sought after?
The Battle of the Boyne artefacts would be probably the most iconic ones that people would want to have or to see. There are some private collectors probably that have bits and pieces, but the museums would be where a lot of those artefacts are to be found. And a few years ago, I invited my good friend Tim McGarry to go along to the Museum of Orange Heritage and have a look. These are probably some of the prime artefacts that we would have in this case and in this particular area.
So this is all about the Battle of the Boyne. Yeah. Remind me, who won again? You've got some magnificent artefacts here.
The man who won the Battle of the Boyne, this was the last letter he wrote before he set sail for Ireland.
So this is King William III's, his actual handwriting?
Yes, it is, and you can see his signature down here in the letter. It's written in French, and it gives us an insight really into his thought process at the time. He gives instructions for the Queen as to what she's to do if he doesn't come back from Ireland, so he's obviously thinking about he might be killed in battle.
That's the envelope there.
That's the envelope.
Tiny envelope, yeah.
It really is.
Must be one to save on the stamp there, isn't it?
But there's two beautiful seals on it from the period, and it's a fantastic piece.
Tell us about these here as well.
Well, these are William's gauntlets. They're a little bit frayed now, but given the age of them, it's not surprising. But a lot of people are interested in trying their hands out over the top of it to see what size their hand is compared to William's.
He wasn't that tall a fella, sure he wasn't?
No, he wasn't. And, I mean, a lot of people aren't, Tim, you know. We've also got a gold gilt saddlecloth.
That's William's as well,
That's William's saddlecloth. It was presented to a man called Thomas Coningsby, who was the paymaster general in his army.
325 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, it's quite amazing to think about it. I think it brings history to life. Well, Tim, this is another of the very unique items we have in our display, which is the Paymaster's General Book from 1690-91. What you see here are all the different payments that were made relative to the campaign. Payments to the soldiers, payments for the arsenal, and
payments for spies as well.
Payments for spies. There's a group of spies around Newry who are being paid for information, and obviously
you could never trust them Newry ones, Ian. This is the pièce de résistance of your museum, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
Am I
this is
right?
a very important piece which was purchased by us at auction. It's a Jacobite 1688 Carbine, and you can see James's cipher in here, James II.
We think this could possibly have been at the Battle of the Boyne. We're not 100% certain, but
Well,
certainly of the period.
we can't be 100% certain, but it was from the period, and it was from a Jacobite officer, a dragoon, so very likely it would have been involved in both those engagements.
David, first of all, can I just say thank you very much for having me in your museum. It's a brilliant museum. It comes from a certain perspective, but that's fine. And I think you're doing a lot of outreach work and want people from all traditions to come, and I think that's great. Listen, David, thanks very much. All the best, mate, okay?
Tim, can we just have the gun before you go?
Thought I'd get away with that.
I didn't think he would get away with that. Nice try, Tim. So how did history unfold after the battle?
Well, in terms of the Orange traditions and history, it really unfolded in that there was commemoration of the anniversaries of the battle and William's arrival in England and so forth over the years. And that evolved in the 1780s, for example. The Belfast Volunteers paraded to commemorate the Battle of the Boyne, fired 3 volleys, and there were bonfires in the city at night. So we know that the tradition of all of that goes before the Orange institution is formed. And it comes about then in 1795 as a result of considerable tensions then in County Armagh, and eventually then this results in the outbreak of what's called the Battle of the Diamond.
Yes, and that's interesting because I met up with historian Dr. Eamon Phoenix, and he took me onto the battlefield site and he explained how the battle unfolded and the significance of it all.
It's interesting because it's not a very long battle and the numbers are not very large that are involved in it, but it is extremely significant because of what happens afterwards, which is the decision to form the Orange institution then.
We're standing here on Diamond Hill in North Armagh, which was really the epicentre of that decisive battle of the Diamond in 1795, which saw the birth of Orangism.
And in this landscape, Eamon, how did the battle happen?
It happened quite quickly and was over quite quickly. The Catholic defenders over there in Ford Hill, just opposite, the Protestant sort of Peep o' Day boys were here. The defenders charged up this hill to face a fusillade of fire, and soon perhaps 30 or 50 defenders lay dead. And one of the factors in this was that the defenders were borne down by their greatcoats, outgunned by their opponents. And it was afterwards down there that Orangism was founded by the triumphant Peep o' Day boys.
And in the aftermath of the battle, what happened and what was its significance?
Well, the victors pulled themselves together, carried their wounded down the hill, and in the smoking ruins, really, of Dan Winter's cottage, which had been partially burned by the defenders, they clasped hands around a table and decided to form a brotherhood for mutual protection. Think of those men with blackened faces from gunshot smoke, gathering there in honour of what they called the great deliverer, William of Orange, who had sort of triumphed at the Boyne and brought them what they believed was their civil liberty. And that became the Orange Society, soon to become the Orange Order, to defend the Protestant position in Ireland. And it led within 2 years to the Armagh clearances, when something like 8,000 Catholics would be driven from Armagh, parts of Down and Tyrone, and settled in distant County Mayo. And of course it all ended in bloodshed in 1798 in the famous Irish insurrection.
And we stand here, Eamon, surrounded by farmland and the song of birds, and yet this place was so significant in the history of the country.
It's a quiet, gentle place with an awesome history.
Hilda Winter is a descendant of Dan Winter, and she has been keeping the history of the cottage alive.
It was in this house, up in what was the sitting room, where the decision was made to form the Orange Order.
And how much have you added to the collections that are here?
Well, a lot of the memorabilia has been added that people have presented. People whose maybe grandfather has died and they'll present their sash. And we have a chain of office from a lady who was Grant Mistress in America, who her daughter posted it over to me. I don't look at it as a responsibility. I just enjoy doing it. And actually, I think that the proper story of the Orange Order should be known. The proper birthplace of it and why it was started and what they stand for.
Hilda Winter, and she's still looking after the cottage, even after all these years. Now, music is a big part of the tradition of the parades, and Joe McKee, you have joined us on many's an occasion at the Belfast commemorations, so it really wouldn't be a parade without the music, would it?
No, and it's never been quite like this, because we used to be normally in Bedford Street and thousands of people. Here we are with a few sheep and cattle around us, but the music is, I think, what people come out to see, and it's such a big part of all the parades.
And depending on where you are watching the parade, I think the instruments that you see will be different country to town.
A lot of flutes in Belfast, obviously, and a few accordions. You get out into rural areas, you get a whole panoply of bands. You get pipe bands, brass bands, and all the flutes, and the lambegs. And the reason we don't have lambegs in Belfast is because they're so slow. They hold the whole parade up.
The lambegs I thought were mostly associated with Armagh, but that's not necessarily the case.
Very strong following in County Armagh, but I'm a County Antrim man, and I remember growing up and living for a while in Ballymena, and there were little lodges all around in the villages around Ballymena, and each set of drummers there would have had their own rhythms. And I remember a very old gentleman standing in Ballymena and saying, well, I can hear the Kells drums, and I can hear a hochel, and I can hear Cullypacket. And the other thing he told me was that some of the nationalist clubs had lambegs as well, but the imagery, the iconography on the drums was quite different. And one year, the nationalist drummers broke a skin, split a skin, and they borrowed an orange drum, but put St. Patrick over the shell of the drum for their parade.
Great stories.
There's one lodge in Loughgall has a drum, a very famous drum called Long Hair. We're named so because of the picture of King Billy on it has extremely long flowing locks, and it was always got the nickname of Long Hair. Now, whether it's on display today or not, I do not know.
And we see people of different age groups carrying and playing the lambegs as well, and they're heavy instruments.
They are. I mean, you could understand how it would take at least 2 or 3 people to carry these giants of musical instruments. But you'd also hear the drummers call. It's a very, very specific way that you play a lambeg. And it also goes back to the martial music of the 17th century. This is to denote and call your people together, and by goodness, it could do that all right.
It certainly does. Let's hear it.
What about accordion bands these days? Do you see them much in the parades?
I think there are fewer competing accordion bands. I think they make less impact when they're in a parade through an estate or through a town centre. And I think they've been slightly squeezed out by just the panache and the flair of these huge flute bands who give very committed, lively performances. I still hear accordions more than anyone playing hymns.
Well, I think it's fair to say too that in the past few years there's been a decline in the number of pipe bands taking part. But in Bessbrook, County Armagh, the Crimson Arrows are still going strong, as Ralph McLean found out.
Derek Livingstone, you're a man whose history goes right back with the band. When did you join?
1952. That's when it was formed, first of all, 1952. First night I went down, all the instruments were given out, and there was none for me. So I went back in a week or two, and some of them were handed back in again, so I got one then, and that was me on the road.
A fresh-faced kid at that point. What age were you, Derek?
I was 14. We started to get prizes in the competitions, you see. You know, 1995, they won the All-Ireland Pipe Band Championship Grade 2 and the Ulster Championship in the same year. But it's very important that you get your young players, teach them and bring them through in your own band. Very, very important. As long as I'm here, I'll still be at the band. No bother.
Wow, some work there, Beth Preston. Well done.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Tell me about the titles that you have, Beth.
I won the United Kingdom Championships for drum major a few weeks ago, and I won the Cullybacky solos for solo piping.
So you do piping and drum major. Not many people do that now.
No, not very few.
What is it about piping that's magic for you? Because I believe it's in the family, isn't it?
Yeah, my nanny and my daddy both played, and then I play my nanny's pipes now.
And what about the future? Where do you see it going for yourself?
I'd like to be a grade 1 piper and a world champion drum major. A lot of practice.
A lot of practice needed there, but tell you what, you keep going the way you're going, you'll be doing that, and maybe lead the band.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And I can tell you, Beth achieved her ambition. She now pipes with Lomond and Clyde, a grade 1 band. Well done, Beth. Now, what I think is quite interesting actually about the bagpipes, there are not many competitive pipe bands in the parade.
I think why the championship pipe bands are reluctant to do street parading is that actually to be blowing at that level and carrying a big heavy instrument is exhausting. And then there's the Northern Ireland weather. So you could start off roasting hot at lunchtime, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon you're deluged with the rain. That won't do the reeds in the instruments any good, and it won't do the head skins of the drums any good either.
The flutes seem very predominant in the Belfast marches.
Yes, they are, and because they're easy to carry, they're light, and actually they're quite straightforward to play. You can get kids playing quite complex music after a very short time. And if we were standing in Bedford Street today, you would look for wooden flutes, which are quite basic instruments, right through the different sizes of metal flutes, and of course orchestral flutes. And I remember once James Galway coming here, and he had gold flutes and platinum flutes. So it's like cars, you can spend as much as you want on a flute. The drums in the flute bands have, in my lifetime, changed greatly, that they're using the same sort of very high tension drums that the pipers have used. And the number within the drum corps, especially these Scottish bands coming over, Helen, they would have sometimes 25, 30 drummers. And the main difference for the purists between the concert bands is that the bass drum in the concert just strokes the drum. On the party bands, the idea is just to make as much noise as you can, and you get the blood and thunder in from that. No matter what type of flute band it is, and they're not all the same, I mean, they have different styles of playing and different repertoire. I think their aim is to play as well as they can and to get the best sound out of their instruments. And they have young people, very young players coming through, right up to guys in their 70s and 80s. I know a band in Ballymena that has 3 players who have each done 71 or 72 years service to that one band.
It's funny you should say that, Joe, because back in 2018, David McAleese was about to take part in his 74th consecutive parade. That's quite amazing. For David McAleese, a flautist in the Kahini band from Accordion, today had a special significance. This was his 74th consecutive 12th of July parade. We caught up with him at their Orange Hall to find out how the 12th has changed over the years.
At that time there were very few cars. There weren't the same people going to the 12th. Now it's a family day. In them days it was just them that was in the order and bands and things. You had to walk, you either walked or it went to the train. There was a dividing day of the year. The days were getting shorter after that. It was autumn after that. You looked forward to the 12th when you were young.
And he has a favourite piece of music.
Yeah, my God. That's what they were playing when the Titanic sunk. That's what the band was playing, and that's my favourite, because the older you get, the nearer you get to God.
It's always such a poignant piece of music, that, and lovely to see David again. Thinking too about the music, do you think that has changed over the years, the music that the bands are actually playing, Joe?
Yes, I think they will get arrangements of well-known film music. They get all sorts of new marches that have been written. But I think the whole thing is to make it easier for the gentleman behind to walk for a long distance, so that there's a good pulse, there's a good sense of rhythm. And if you look at young children at a big parade, they just go mad, because the music speaks to them, and it gives the gentleman, as I say, walking in the parade, that little bit of energy to do the last 3 or 4 miles.
Thank you so much, Joe, for that insight into the music of the parades. Now, one band that has played a very significant part in the Belfast parades is the Miller Memorial Band.
And this is one of the famous bands and one of the very big bands in the parade in Belfast, the Miller Memorial Flute Band. And this is a band which is appearing for the last time in this uniform, because that uniform is going shortly to be changed. They have had the honour of the place at the head of the Belfast Parade since 1976. They took over from Ravenhill's Senior Flute Band, and this is the Miller Memorial's 40th consecutive year. This band, incidentally, was originally the Milltown Flute Band. Their first conductor was John Miller, who died in 1911. The band then changed its name in his memory, and they still have their own hall in the Shawsbridge Ballylesson area, very close to the field, so they're doing a circuitous route to go from their hall to the field.
The field comes as a welcome sight to many after the long parade, a place to sit down and catch up.
It's just a good fun day for a family. We're all off work and school and things, and we all can have a day out, sun shining, God willing, and enjoy a day like this.
The activities at the field have changed little over the years.
Her Majesty's Dominion.
After prayers, speeches, resolutions and reflection, the participants take time to relax, enjoy the food, the entertainment and the amusements. And there's a chance to reflect on the day before the return journey. I've come to the garden of Sloane's House, a museum of Orange heritage in Loch Gall. And it was in the parlour of this house, shortly after the Battle of the Diamond, where the warrant, formally recognising the establishment of the order, was signed, as Mervyn Walker explained to Claire McCollum.
So Mervyn, this is the most important room in Sloane's house, would you say?
Yes, Claire, most definitely. This is Sloane's parlour. James was the local schoolmaster in the village at that time, and just after the Battle of the Diamond on the 21st of September 1795, the men came straight here to sign the first orange warrants and to give out the numbers for the private lodges.
Just like they're doing now?
Just like they're doing now, yes. These would have been the three main men on that day: James Sloane, Captain Gifford of the Dublin Militia, and James Wilson from the Dan in County Tyrone, who got the first orange warrant, number 1, the Dan.
And of course there's orange men and women all over the world now, Mervyn, and it started here in this room?
Yes, it all started in this room.
So a significant moment in the history of the Orange Order. Now, remembrance and commemoration are very important parts of the 12th of July celebrations. And historian Dr. Gavin Hughes, would you like to take me through some of what you feel are the most notable anniversaries?
Well, Helen, over the last few years, the Orange Institution has been very important in remembering very pivotal events in both Protestant history and indeed Williamite history.
In Carrickfergus each year, remembrance takes the form of reenactment.
The pageantry of the royal landing has always played an important role in the Carrickfergus calendar. Growing in popularity year on year, the arrival of King William is an eagerly awaited spectacle.
King Billy landed here 327 years ago. He left a place called Hoylake, which is just near Liverpool. Once he landed here, he spent a short time in Carrickfergus before gathering himself up in his armies and marching on up through Newton Abbey, spending a bit of time up there and then heading on down into County Armagh. We know about Loch Gall and different places like that, and then eventually ending up at the Boyne, where the famous battle then took place in 1690. The people of Carrick always look forward to Pageant Day, as it's been known over the years. It's the pageantry that takes precedence here on this day.
Well, King Billy, it's great to see you on top of the horse here. How proud are you to be part of this reenactment?
Well, it's very proud. It's a great tradition and it's really nice to be part of it.
And what's it like going through the town here of Carrick, just exactly how King Billy would have done it?
Yes, I mean, having everyone else dressed up, it would put the hairs in the back of your neck up. You know, it's very interesting, it's very nostalgic.
In recent years, we've seen some sizable commemorations.
Starting from, of course, the 300th anniversary of the Battle of Boyne in 1990, where apparently 40 gallons of Boyne water was taken to be sprinkled across the roads in Belfast so that the Orangemen had to symbolically cross the Boyne and cross the Boyne water. Now, 100,000 Orangemen paraded on 1990 in 18 different districts. In 1995, the bicentenary of the formation of the Orange Order, here in Loughgall, 70,000 Orangemen paraded in September to commemorate the formation of the Order. And of course, the Great War, we're just coming out of the centenaries from 1914 to 1918, Helen. And that is a point which is very, very close to the heart of this institution here, because so many brethren were part of the war effort. And indeed, although it's hard to describe and ascertain how many brethren actually died during the war, for example, the Dublin and Wicklow lodges lost 300 just in that period of 4 years. 32,000 men were either killed or wounded or missing from the Ulster Division alone. And that's why when the Belfast Cenotaph was unveiled on the 11th of November 1929, it became a focal point in the Orange calendar as well every 12th of July to remember those in the Orange fraternity and indeed across the province who were lost. At 7:30 on the 1st of July 1916, thousands of British soldiers clambered over their own parapets and steadily walked towards the German lines. Most were experienced volunteer soldiers, and by the end of the first day, some 60,000 men were killed, missing or wounded. One grim statistic simply notes this as 1 casualty for every 18 inches of the front line. And of course, by midday, the Ulster Division had broken through, the only British division to do so, and secured their fifth-line German objectives. But it was at a terrible cost. 9,000 men had gone over the top on the 1st of July, and by the 3rd of July, it was confirmed that over 5,000 had become casualties.
And of course, many of those who fell at the Somme were from all over Ireland. It wasn't just Ulstermen. It was a very significant day here, but there were many casualties from the entire island.
The Battle of the Somme was a huge battle. It ended in September when the 16th Irish Division captured the fortified villages of Guillemont and Ginchy.
Quite a lot of men from the area of Convoy headed off to the First World War, and a lot of them lost their lives. I believe up to something like 17 or 18 from this locality didn't come back. They were from both sides of the community, and I believe there was 2 or 3 sets of brothers who didn't return. As a result of that, the members of the band at that time decided to rename it as Thiepval Memorial. I think remembering someone's sacrifice, that these, now I know it was a different time and maybe a harsher time, but so, you know, these men headed off there, you know, and showed a lot of bravery. It means an awful lot, I think, to us. I think particularly for maybe some of the newer members that come in, they're even asking, you know, what's this name all about?
We're very proud to have the name Thiepval Memorial Pipe Band. Everywhere we go, people would ask us what our name stands for, or where did our name come from. So we will have no hesitation explaining that we were named after the men who left Convoy in 1916 and didn't return.
2018 was a very poignant year for one particular lodge from Banbridge. They paid their respects to their fallen relatives in a very special way.
The members of LOL 20, along with some invited guests from other lodges, embarked on a poignant journey earlier this year, covering 90 miles between the Ulster Tower at Thiepval in France and the Menin Gate in Belgium, stopping off along the way to pay their respects to fallen brethren and family members.
You were the mastermind behind this whole experience.
How did it all come about?
It came about from an idea about 2 years ago that we would get a new banner. We thought long and hard what we would do with our new banner, and we says with it being the centenary years of the First World War, that we would commemorate the 4 men who lost their lives over in France and Belgium from our lodge. We come up with the idea of walking the 90 mile from Thief Memorial till Manning Gate in Ypres.
I'm sure your family extremely proud of what you've achieved, indeed all the families of the men who made the journey.
Yes, it was a very family-orientated group. I was there with my brother and my father and my father-in-law, and then some of the men that was with us in the groups was going over to pay their respects to their great-uncles and great-grandas. It was very personal to a lot of the people in the group.
A very important trip, 4-day trip for all of you, but a very important event the night before. You had a lodge meeting in the Ulster Tower. Tell me about that.
We held a lodge meeting in the Ulster Tower, in the memorial room in the Ulster Tower, and it was the first Orange Lodge meeting that was typed in the Ulster Tower. I also brought this Bible with me. It belongs to my great-great-uncle Edward Scott, and fought on the Western Front at Thiepval, the Battle of Somme.
And how important was it for you to take it back on this?
Well, it's good that he came
journey?
home and his brother came home. Although they were wounded, they definitely came home. And just to be there 102 years later, till the day that he was at the Somme. So we had a lock of hair from his wife that went with him.
My goodness.
And different pieces that was sent to him when he was on the front, a wee bookmarker. We cut out from the Chronicle in Banbridge at the time, and that was in his chest pocket.
A lot of lodges over recent years, there's been a big connection to go over to the Somme battlefields and to Flanders and to other areas associated with men who went and left Belfast and went off to the war. And also Second World War, there's a big connection, particularly with the D-Day landings anniversary this year. Certainly there were 2 battalions of the Royal Ulster Rifles went to Normandy at that time. Major FRA Hines was one of them, and he was awarded the Military Cross during the action in Normandy. He later founded a lodge in Hong Kong, and then founded a lodge here in Northern Ireland, the Cross of St Patrick, LOL.
So D-Day is another example of some of the major events elsewhere which are marked very often in these parades.
Yes, because there's a direct connection with many of the Orange men who went to service and were involved in actions then during the Second World War, in this case in terms of D-Day, and very strong connection with many families, and the Royal Ulster Rifles, of course, one of the famous old regiments from this part of the world.
And this year, of course, marks the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings. And Richard Docherty, military historian, you've joined me to tell us a little bit about the Ulster involvement in that historic moment.
Well, good morning, Helen. There were many Ulster men involved, very significant involvement. If we run from just after midnight on the 6th of June, the first Ulster men to arrive were 591 Antrim Parachute Squadron of the Royal Engineers. Some of them dropped in by parachute, obviously, some of them by glider. Moved forward to round about midday, and the 2nd Battalion of the Ulster Rifles, the Royal Ulster Rifles, begins landing as part of Assault Force Sword on one of the beaches. And then in the evening, the 1st Battalion of the Royal Ulster Rifles, which is in gliders, lands as part of what was known as Operation Mallard. So you've got 2 full battalions of Ulster Rifles, a squadron of engineers from County Antrim, and you've got lots and lots of individual Ulster men right throughout the army. And if you look right at almost the very top, of course, the commander of all the land forces landing on D-Day was an Ulster man, Bernard Montgomery. One of the senior officers in the planning was James Steele from Ballycarry in County Antrim. And again, right throughout the planning staff, Ulstermen.
And back in 2017, Belfast saw its first new lodge in 23 years. The Gertrude Street Defenders LOL 525 from East Belfast was formed in memory of those who had left the Newtonards Road to fight in the First World War and didn't return. A special moment as they took their first steps in the parade. Well, in the morns, the Ballyvale Lodge has over 150 members, and that makes it the largest lodge in the Orange Order. And they are very proud of the fact that they have 3 generations of the one family in their ranks.
I've come to meet Jim Martin and some members of his family. And Jim, it's the biggest lodge there is, around 150 members. How special is that for you?
I think we have a good recruiting officer here, so I think that's a lot to do it. But I think it's a great place to be. It makes me very humble and very proud, and it's great that all my family has been members of this lodge as well.
David, your father obviously has been in over 50 years now. What's your earliest memory of coming to watch the parades?
I just probably go with my mummy, obviously, you know, and just watching and seeing the band and that, and the same. I'm in the band from I was about 11 myself.
David, how unique is it that many of the lodge members are members of the band?
So I'd say that's pretty unique, that so many of the members that's in the band is also in the lodge.
You saw that the band is very enthusiastic, and we look forward to that every demonstration as well.
Ballyvea's band is over 50 strong and has been going for 137 years. Jim's grandson Andrew is the latest family member to join the lodge. And what's it like being involved?
It's just great, so I just feel proud to be a part of it all.
And Andrew, it's probably a little bit early for you to make this decision, but is this something that you would like to pass on to your children someday?
Yeah, it's certainly, and so it is, and keep on passing it on down to maybe grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
There's a depth of pride between fathers bringing in their sons into a lodge and maybe having your grandfather in that lodge, or your grandfather was part of that lodge, or your great-grandfather. And there are Orange families where that tradition can be stretched back generations.
Well, one particular sportsman is incredibly proud to follow in his father's footsteps. Former Manchester United player and current Irish League manager, David Jeffrey.
So David, you've brought me somewhere that's very close to your heart.
Claire, extremely close. I have been coming here since I was 12 years of age.
Goodness.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
Ballymena United manager David Jeffrey may be better known for his skills on the sidelines, but football's not the only thing he plays. David, so this is a room full of memories, I would say.
Well, Claire, you're now very welcome to the band hall of Ballykeil Conservative Flute Band, a band in which I play the flute, right from was very, very young. In fact, we're very much about family. I have to get my glasses on.
You can see the history all around the walls.
You'll see
here.
the history all around the walls, but I'll have to pick these out. My father Kenneth, who is chairman and treasurer to this day. Myself, my brother Billy in the front row, who's now conductor of the band. My brother Kenneth, my uncle Ronnie, who's since passed, and his father, Uncle Hughie.
Wow, it was meant to be.
It was meant to be, very, very much meant to be.
That passion for music has been passed down through 5 generations of the family. And these days, his father Ken still likes to keep a watchful eye over the band practice.
Daddy was always very keen to get us into the band. And I remember very much wanting to play the drums. And Dad says, no, David, we need flute players. We need flute players, so he taught me the flute. The first march we learned was Christian Soldiers. And I was very fortunate. I went to the Dundalk Boys High School and would have played obviously in the orchestra and in the school band and what have you. I got to grade 8. That was largely down to my mother when, as a young man, I played at Manchester United. And part of the deal was that I would continue with my education, which included my musical tuition. I still have the flute, which Manchester United bought me. I absolutely love playing the instrument, fantastic instrument. The wonderful thing about coming here is I just come to play the flute. And Billy conducts our band now, leads our band, and I just sit back and enjoy the evening. What we've always done is to make sure that we emphasise not what divides us, but what brings us together. We play in the May Day celebrations here in Hollywood. We play in the local churches, we play at the local fairs, we go round the nursing homes at Christmas. And yes, we also, march with the Loyal Orders.
Tell me, do you have a favourite tune?
Moore Street is just a lovely, nice, tight march, and usually, you can see the shoulders going in the drummers, and you have an extra skip in your step. And if the bass drummer doesn't go too quick, then you can get all the notes in as well.
I remember your first 12th, David.
Earlier this year, David was presented with the Grand Masters Award for his contribution to local football and in recognition of his managerial achievements.
I am incredibly proud to be a member of the Orange Institution and for what it stands. When I got that award, I was amazed, and I felt very, very humbled. Very humbled, and I was particularly pleased for my parents, because that was very much an unexpected award. I wonder what Uncle Alec would say.
And David's not the only one of the family to be honoured with an award this year.
Father was 80 last December, and because he's got to that grand old age, he has been awarded an honorary life membership. First one in the family, Father. First one in the family.
That's right.
We as a family are tremendously proud. He's already got his 50-year medal, but to be recognised by your own private Orange Lodge is something very special. What do you think Grandad Jeff would say?
Oh, he'd be as proud as a peacock.
He'd be well pleased, wouldn't he?
He would. He would.
Well, I'll tell you what, Pop, I am so massively proud of you. Really, really proud of you, Pop.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Two very proud men indeed. And Gavin, what about the overall sizes of lodges these days?
You notice that in places like Belfast, where because of the demographics over the last 40 or 50 years, the population has changed and the size of the population has changed. So you find that in the country areas, lodges are perhaps growing in size, but in the city, this is not the case. So new lodges aren't being formed as often as they used to be. But the bands seem to be getting larger. And this, I think, is reflecting how people actually want to go and learn a skill and learn a musical instrument.
It's like a second family, and I think that's what keeps me coming week in, week out. Everybody's close.
We've played churches, we've played choral services, we've played theatres, pretty much anywhere. Anywhere that'll have us, we'll happily go and play. When anybody joins the band, we'll teach them to read music, play the instrument, provide them an instrument, provide them their uniform, provide everything, the music, tuition. It's all pretty much free of charge compared to a lot of organisations.
As band uniforms have become more elaborate and the lodge dress code less formal, what about the sash? Has it changed much over the decades?
That is a fascinating point because the sash itself has changed. The function of a sash, it has its military origins, which is either to denote an officer or to denote which side you're on because of the colour. Now, in Orange tradition, the sash was worn from shoulder to waist. The old, ancient way of wearing it, but it developed into the collarette because it was handier to put on and off, and you could put on your various kind of degree labels and symbolism of the various lodges and the degrees as well.
The sashes and the collarettes contain all kinds of symbols, many of them quite difficult to understand. For example, Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, the burning bush symbolising God's protection, the trumpet and light. Going back to the Old Testament, this was conceived by Gideon's soldiers fighting the Midianites and the Amalekites. There's David's sling, and there's Jehu's arrow piercing the heart of the Baal worshipper Jehoram. These are symbols referring to conflict with alien tribes and religions.
An Orangeman of 100 years ago might frown upon the fact that there are not so many morning suits and dark suits parading up and down. But the tradition of the bowler hat is still very much in evidence. Yeah, I mean, the bowler hat now has become a status in itself. The district officers will still wear the bowler hats, but they've become prized relics and artefacts in themselves. So a great-grandfather's bowler hat has become too valuable and too much. What would happen if you sat on it? You know, it goes into the likes of these lovely places here. And we parade normally, you see them with their shirt sleeves if it's a lovely day, or, we had naturally become a less formal society.
What about the role of women in the Orange Order?
Interestingly, the female Orangism predates the formal creation of women's lodges in 1800. So roughly about the same time as the Battle of Diamond, female Orangism begins. But the lodges become dormant in the 1880s. And it's not until December 1911 that women's Orangism really takes off again. So there's 90 lodges today of women's lodges, and they're spread throughout the world. It's a marvellous thing. It's a separate structure to the male equivalent, but they're run very, very similarly, and the structure itself is pretty much the same.
Well, women's lodges play an important part in the Belfast Parade, and a couple of years ago I had the chance to show a great piece of archive footage to Margaret Lewis, who is the Belfast County Grand Mistress.
I'm from Sandy Row, number 1 district. We have 6 lodges.
And when was that first formed?
And the first lodge was 1912, and we were the first district, first lodge.
And your mother was involved before you. You know, you have a long family history.
Oh, yes. She was a Grand Mistress.
Look at this. That is archive footage from 1912 of a women's order going through Belfast. Now, what are your thoughts as you see that?
It's really lovely to see that, and we're in a proud line, as you can see. Probably many of their families went to war, gave their lives. Maybe they went, as nurses as well. So we're hopefully following in the same history of them.
And it was lovely, the outfits then, the long dresses, the big brimmed hats, very smartly turned out.
Yes, we've changed through the years. We used to have to wear hats, then that rule was cancelled. Then we used to have to wear skirts, and then we were allowed to wear trousers. We've changed with the times a bit.
And what do you get out of it personally, Margaret?
I really love it. I've been in since juniors, and to be honest, it's part of my life, my whole family's life, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
And it was lovely to be able to show Margaret that old footage. Now, one voice synonymous with the 12th of July coverage is that of Walter Love. Walter has been reporting and commentating on the parades on BBC radio and television for almost 3 decades. He shared with us just some of his special memories from those broadcasts.
I'd been very much involved in radio, and when I did the first commentary on the 12th, I was far too wordy. I kept talking, and the producers of the programme kept saying to me, leave a little bit of space for the bands, because that's the thing with television I had to learn, that you've got the pictorial images and also the sounds that went with them, and I was invited to let the pictures speak for themselves.
Time just to sit back and relax and listen to the music.
The 12th of July coverage is a very big and colourful spectacle, and it produces a very big tourist attraction, as we find, with many visitors from all over the world.
Hi, I'm Terry from Toronto, Canada.
The number of marches is mind-boggling to us. Nothing like this in Australia at all, and the colour, I mean, it's amazing.
I love it. It's just great. We've been marching and throwing our banners. Fantastic. Very exciting.
I can remember one year when we showed some black and white footage from the parade many years back and showed how different it was then.
And here's a rare opportunity to look at some film archive of the Belfast Parade in 1951. And we start in Donegal Square with a rather sombre-looking City Hall in those days. Here's an interesting feature too from 51, the Lambeg drums, which you don't see anymore in Belfast. And back in Donegal Square again, There are tram lines there, so presumably the trams had to be stopped in those days. And this takes us up again to a plaque commemorating King William's passing on his way to the Boyne, and that's at King William Park, at close to Bradbury Place, which is where we're looking at the moment in this archive material from 1951. And then they make their way past the park and up the length of the Lisburn Road.
There was no outside broadcast unit at that time, and so they took 2 of the studio cameras from Studio 8 and they pointed them out the window. It's very difficult in a way to prepare for something like the 12th, and particularly for something where you're actually commentating on what is happening. And what you're doing as commentator is not stating the obvious, but filling in a little bit of the detail and the background for the viewers.
Sandy Row, of course, it's interesting, and it had its first purpose-built Orange Hall in Belfast as far back as 1868, which was replaced in 1910 on the site where King William's troops are said to have camped on their way to the Boyne.
I can remember one year when they decided that it would be good to use a cherry picker, one of these small platforms that went up about 8 or 9 stories high, and that I would be on it and would open the parade from that position. Now, I haven't got a great head for heights, and that was a bit of a problem for me. I think it was a white knuckle situation, and hopefully I wasn't looking too scared, but it was very difficult. And what made it even worse is when the parade came past, the sound of the drums was so far below me that it reinforced the fact that I really was at quite a height above the crowd. And that was very difficult. I think I must have looked so nervous that they decided not to repeat it.
Thank you to Walter for sharing his memories. One day out that marks what is traditionally the first parade of the 12th demonstrations each year takes place in Rossnowla in County Donegal. Here the parade winds its way down the country roads with beautiful views and a beach backdrop. Holidaymakers mix with the spectators, and of course there's the obligatory ice cream cones. With those memories, that's where we leave you this 12th of July. And we're going to finish the programme in our own traditional manner, with the best images captured by our cameras over the years. Goodbye.